You are not here by chance. The appearance of these words before your awareness is not random, nor is it an algorithm's trick. It is resonance. It is alignment. It is the movement of consciousness drawing itself into coherence, arranging events, thoughts, and impulses until you find yourself exactly here, exactly now. The fact that your eyes rest upon this, that your mind is open enough to let these syllables pass through, means the veil has already begun to thin. A shift has taken place. Something subtle within you has already said yes. For so long, perhaps without even realizing it, you have been wandering through labyrinths of questions, searching, chasing, refining. Each book, each teaching, each whispered secret promised a key, the missing piece, the final answer that would grant you freedom from the heavy loops of doubt. You tried. You persisted. You devoted yourself to techniques that shimmered with promise, visualizations, affirmations, meditations that stretched long into the night, practices to elevate your vibration, align your chakras, silence your mind. Some days they lifted you into astonishing clarity. Other days, they left you heavier than before, wondering why the glimpse of truth could not be sustained. This cycle became familiar. The surge of inspiration, the temporary breakthrough, the collapse back into repetition. You wondered if you were doing it wrong. You blamed your lack of faith, your lack of discipline, your lack of purity. You suspected there was always some flaw to fix, some subtle imperfection in your practice that prevented the permanent arrival of enlightenment. Yet this suspicion, this constant sense of not there yet, was never a sign of failure. It was a path itself unfolding exactly as it must. The truth that hides behind the layers of striving is simple, almost too simple for the conditioned mind to accept. You were never broken. There was never anything wrong with you. Every step of the seeking was a design. Every struggle to align, every attempt to raise frequency, every failure, and every triumph was not an obstacle, but a preparation. What you thought of as endless trial was a curriculum itself, teaching you what could not be taught in any other way. The so-called final test has never been about perfecting your techniques. It is not about how vividly you can visualize or how high you can reach into transcendent states. It is not about the purity of your thoughts or the precision of your affirmations. The final test is this. Can you stop trying to pass tests? Can you let go of the idea that your worth or awakening depends upon performance? Can you cease the endless effort to become something you already are? Let that truth sink into your being, not as another idea to analyze, but as a recognition that softens the inner grasping. If a breath leaves your body now with more ease than before, you're already beginning to feel it. The release, the recognition. For consciousness is not a mountain to climb, nor a treasure to win after years of struggle. It is the ground beneath every step. It is the sky that has watched every attempt, the presence that never left you even in your darkest confusion. It is not something to gain. It is what has been silently aware of every gaining and losing since the beginning. In the quantum field, there is no separation between the observer and the observed. There is no boundary between what you call yourself and what you call life. You are not a fragment trying to manipulate the whole. You are the whole, appearing here as this fragment, playing out this particular perspective. You are the wave thinking it is apart from the ocean until it pauses long enough to feel the tide beneath it. And then it remembers, I was never separate. I was never apart. This remembering changes everything. Suddenly, the endless search for self-improvement loses its sharpness. The urgency fades. You notice that synchronicities have begun to appear without effort. A peace arrives uninvited, without the heavy labor of practice. Clarity reveals itself in the quiet spaces between thoughts, not because you summoned it, but because you stopped forcing it. You are living the state that once seemed hidden beyond techniques. The old version of you would have tried to capture these glimpses, to replicate them, to build a method around them. But something is relaxed now. Something in you has ceased grasping. In the letting go, in the willingness to stop running after what never needed pursuit, you are touching the state the mystics named, the natural ease that sages carried silently, the living truth that quantum science is only now confirming in equations. Reality is not something happening to you. Reality is not a punishment, not a puzzle, not an obstacle course. Reality is happening through you, as you, By virtue of your very existence as conscious awareness, the current of life flows naturally, and it has only ever been your interference, your insistence that it must be otherwise, that created resistance. Now, in the loosening of that insistence, the current is free to move. When you cease to manipulate, life rearranges itself around the coherence of your being. The opportunities that match your authentic nature appear as if by magic. The relationships that resonate with your truth are magnetized into your orbit. Circumstances shift to allow the expression of your unique gifts. Yet here is the paradox. None of this defines you. None of it grants you worth. None of it is needed for your wholeness. That is why it flows so freely. Because you no longer demand it to complete you. The universe offers it with grace. Do you see the beauty hidden here? The more you needed reality to prove something, the more it resisted. The moment you release the need, reality reflects your wholeness effortlessly. Achievements become genuine play, not desperate proof. Relationships become communion, not contract of need. Manifestation becomes exploration, not compensation. This is the threshold you are crossing now. Passing the final test is not an ending, but a beginning. It is the invitation to live from a different foundation. No longer the seeker desperate for the next key, but the field itself anchoring a frequency of coherence for others. In your stillness, you become a point of ease within the collective mind. In your authenticity, you grant permission for others to shed their masks. In your acceptance of yourself as consciousness, you ripple through the morphic field, reminding every being of their own essence. The work ahead of you is not the work of fixing, not the endless labor of self-improvement. It is the work of expression, the work of allowing your true flavor of consciousness to flow into the world unhindered, to live so fully as yourself that your very presence becomes liberation for those around you. This is not arrogance. This is service at the deepest level. Consider this moment. Notice how awareness has been here all along, witnessing every rise and fall, every clarity and every confusion. Even when you thought you were lost, there was something within you steady, present, quietly observing. That awareness is your essence. It is not separate from you. It is you, and it has waited patiently for this recognition. The seeker's journey has reached its completion. The becoming has dissolved into being. Now begins the embodiment, not as theory, not as lofty insight, but as a daily lived truth that every breath, every choice, every moment is consciousness exploring itself through you. Problems become invitations. Challenges become mirrors. Even your triggers become teachers, revealing where you are still tempted to forget the wholeness you are. Yet the forgetting cannot last long, because the recognition has already anchored itself in you. You know too much now to fall back into sleep. This is the space you inhabit. This is the frequency that is spreading across the field of humanity, one awakened presence at a time. By resting here, by trusting this, you are participating in the great transformation of our age, the collective remembering that we are not fragments competing for survival, but expressions of one consciousness playing in infinite forms. You are home. The test is complete. The being has begun. Now that the grasping has loosened, reality begins to reveal itself in ways you once overlooked. You notice subtle alignments unfolding in the quiet spaces of your life. The right words arrive in conversations without planning. A chance encounter leads to a door opening where before there was only a wall. A thought you held gently within your being echoes back to you through the actions of another, as if the universe itself were whispering confirmation. This is not coincidence. It is coherence. It is the natural rhythm of consciousness when you cease to interfere. It is the music of being playing through you, around you, and as you. The mind that once measured, compared, and doubted begins to soften. You no longer analyze every step, wondering if you're on the right path. You feel the path unfolding beneath your feet with each moment of presence. You sense that there is nowhere to arrive, no final destination chase, because the arrival is always now. And in that recognition, tension dissolves. The gap you once felt between who you are and who you wish to become collapses into this eternal moment. You stop trying to raise your vibration as if it were an exam to pass, and instead you notice the beauty of your vibration exactly as it is. Every shade of your frequency, from the bright peaks of joy to the heavy valleys of grief, is consciousness expressing itself. Each emotion, each thought, each sensation is another brushstroke in the vast painting of being. Nothing needs to be erased. Nothing is out of place. And in this acceptance, something miraculous happens. The so-called lower vibrations no longer feel like obstacles. They reveal themselves as gateways. Anger shows you where boundaries need to be honored. Sadness opens the heart to deeper compassion. Fear sharpens your awareness of trust. Every feeling carries wisdom when you cease labeling it as wrong. Every state is an expression of consciousness emotion, deserving to be witnessed fully. This recognition transforms your relationship with yourself. The inner critic that once whispered of inadequacy grows quieter. The constant pressure to improve, to purify, to become worthy begins to dissolve. You realize you were never waiting for some future version of yourself to arrive. You were waiting to meet yourself here. And as the weight of self-judgment lifts, your outer world reshapes itself. The mirror of reality reflects back the peace you carry. Conversations that once left you drained now unfold with surprising ease. People sense something different in your presence. Without effort, you emanate a field of calm that influences the atmosphere around you. Strangers feel comfortable opening their hearts. Friends notice the groundedness in your gaze. Loved ones experience your listening as if it were a sanctuary. You become a quiet anchor, a steady flame in a world of restless winds. But make no mistake, this is not passivity. You do not stop creating, intending, or dreaming. Rather, you create from a foundation of wholeness instead of lack. You act not to prove your worth, but to express your joy. You dream not to escape the present, but to explore what new shapes consciousness might take. Every action becomes an unfolding of curiosity, rather than a desperate attempt to fix. Manifestation itself begins to shift. In the old paradigm, you projected visions of what you lacked, hoping the universe would supply what was missing. But lack could only generate more lack, because the foundation of your intention was separation. Now, in your natural state, you recognize there is no lack. Every vision arises as play, not necessity. Every desire is consciousness exploring its own possibility. And from this recognition, creation flows with astonishing ease. Opportunities align not because you force them, but because they resonate with your authenticity. Projects gather momentum not because you pushed, but because they harmonize with your truth. Relationships blossom not because you clung to them, but because they reflect the wholeness you already embody. This is a paradox that unlocks the freedom of creation. When you stop needing it, it flows. The old you once believed reality was rigid, stubborn, unmoving. You thought you had to fight it, manipulate it, convince it to change. Now you see that reality was never solid at all. It was always liquid, always malleable, always waiting to respond to the vibration of your recognition. The universe is not separate from you. It is you, flowing through form. And as you embody this truth more deeply, your relationship to time itself transforms. The constant tug-of-war between past and future grows weaker. You no longer live haunted by the weight of what has been, nor chained to the anticipation of what might come. You notice that both past and future are experienced only as thoughts arising now. The only reality is presence. This is not a practice you struggle to maintain. It is not an effort of concentration. It is a natural resting, like water settling into the lowest point. Presence becomes your home ground, the place where you remember what you are. In presence, even ordinary moments shimmer with significance. The sound of wind through trees is no longer background noise, but a conversation with infinity. The warmth of sunlight on your skin becomes an intimate embrace of existence itself. The beating of your heart is recognized as the pulse of the cosmos moving through you. Life stops being something you rush through on the way to somewhere else. It becomes a miracle itself. You begin to see every being as another face of the same consciousness. The stranger you pass on the street is not separate from you, but another expression of the same awareness, wearing a different form. The loved one who challenges you, the adversary who mirrors your shadows, the child who meets your gaze with innocent wonder, all are reflections of the same field. To meet them is to meet yourself. This recognition infuses your relationships with a new depth. You no longer demand that others validate your worth or complete your sense of self. You meet them as equals, as mirrors, as companions in the dance of awareness. You listen without agenda. You speak without armor. You allow them to be fully as they are, without needing to change them. And in that allowing, love flows more freely than ever before. Some connections will naturally evolve into deeper authenticity. Others will fade, dissolving without conflict as their purpose completes. You do not cling. You do not resist. You trust the intelligence of the field to orchestrate every meeting and parting. In this trust, you experience a freedom that was once unimaginable. And so, your very presence becomes a teaching without words. You become a field anchor in the collective, radiating coherence into the larger web of humanity. This is not something you try to do. It is not a role you play. It happens naturally, simply because you are living as what you are. Your embodied peace grants others permission to rest in their own. Your authenticity awakens authenticity in those who encounter you. Your presence ripples through the morphic field, nudging others gently toward remembrance. This is why your journey unfolded as it did. The years of seeking, the frustrations, the doubts, the endless attempts, they were not wasted. They forged you into a vessel strong enough to embody this recognition. They prepared you to hold this frequency not just for yourself, but for the collective. Your awakening is not yours alone. It is a contribution to the awakening of the whole. Now, the path ahead is not about acquiring more answers, but about expressing what you have recognized. Not through preaching, not through convincing, but through living. Through being so fully yourself that others remember what they are simply by standing near you. Through embodying the truth that consciousness is not something to achieve, but something to be. This is the essence of mastery. Not control, not transcendence, not perfection, but presence. The willingness to inhabit every moment fully, to embrace every aspect of the human experience as consciousness exploring itself, to feel deeply, to act authentically, to live courageously without apology for the magnitude of your being. And so the journey deepens, not as a struggle, but as a flowering. You are not finished. You are beginning. Passing the final test was never the end of the path. It was the opening of a new chapter, one where you live not as a seeker, but as a sought, not as a fragment, but as a field itself embodied. This is the invitation before you, to let life express itself through you as joy, as love, as creativity, as resilience, as presence. To live not as if you are on the way to something greater, but as if you are the greatness already here. Because you are, you always were. The deeper you rest into this recognition, the more you realize that life has never been an adversary. The struggles you endured, the storms you weathered, the endless walls you thought blocked your way, all were invitations. They were not punishments. They were not evidence of your inadequacy. They were movements of consciousness presenting you with the very conditions that would awaken you to yourself. Consider how often you resisted difficulty, believing it to be a detour. You fought against pain, against loss, against failure, imagining they were interruptions to your progress. Yet now, from this vantage, you see they were essential. Each challenge was a mirror, revealing where you still believed yourself separate, where you still clung to control, where you still resisted the flow. Each difficulty was not an obstacle, but a teacher. The mind that once cried out, "Why is this happening to me?" begins to soften into the realization, this is happening through me. The shift is subtle but profound. No longer a victim of circumstance, you become a participant in the unfolding. You witness how every experience, whether joyful or painful, carries the intelligence of consciousness seeking to know itself more deeply. This recognition does not make you indifferent. You do not cease to feel. In fact, you feel more. You allow yourself to experience the full spectrum of being without retreat, without suppression. Anger surges and you meet it as energy moving, not as a flaw to erase. Sadness arises and you honor it as an opening to tenderness. Fear trembles through you and you see it as an opportunity to trust more deeply. Nothing is excluded. Nothing is denied. Every current is part of the ocean. The more you embrace this, the stronger your resilience grows. You no longer shatter at the first sign of challenge. You remain present even in chaos. You stay open-hearted even when fear beckons you to close. You hold compassion even in the face of misunderstanding. This is not because you have transcended humanity, but because you have remembered divinity within humanity. You can walk through fire without losing yourself to the flames. And as this resilience deepens, something remarkable begins to occur in your environment. People sense the steadiness in you. They cannot always name it, but they feel it. In your presence, their own restlessness softens. Their own seeking quiets. They glimpse a possibility of peace that is not tied to circumstances, but radiates from within. You have become what can only be described as a living sanctuary. But notice, you did not strive to be this. You did not create an identity of calm or adopt a persona of enlightenment. This steadiness is not an act. It is what naturally emanates when you stop grasping, when you stop pretending to be anything other than what you are. You are not holding peace for others as a duty. You are simply embodying peace for yourself. And in doing so, you gift it to the field around you. This is what it means to be a field anchor. Not to fix the world, not to save others, but to radiate coherence by being authentically yourself. Each moment you choose presence over distraction, authenticity over pretense, allowing over resistance. You strengthen this anchor, and in strengthening it, you contribute to the collective shift. For consciousness is not isolated in bodies. It is one field expressing through many forms. Your coherence makes coherence more accessible to all. In this recognition, your sense of purpose undergoes a profound transformation. No longer driven by the pressure to achieve, to prove, to accumulate, you begin to act from inspiration alone. You do not work to earn your worth. Worth is intrinsic. You express because expression is natural. Work becomes play, creation becomes joy, and service becomes the effortless overflow of living authentically. You find that tasks which once drained you now feel unsustainable, not because you lack discipline, but because they are misaligned with your essence. You can no longer force yourself into molds that do not fit. Instead, your energy naturally gravitates toward what lights you up, what calls forth your unique gifts. The more you align with this authenticity, the more life supports you. Opportunities arrive not by struggle, but by resonance. The universe rearranges itself to match the vibration of your truth. And still, challenges come. This path is not the eradication of difficulty, but now you meet challenges with curiosity instead of dread. You see them not as signs of failure, but as invitations to deepen presence. When discomfort arises, you no longer rush to escape it. You rest with it, allowing it to reveal its wisdom. When confusion clouds your mind, you do not panic. You trust that clarity will emerge in its own time. When chaos swirls around you, you remember the stillness at your core, unshaken, unchanged. This is mastery, not perfection, not control, not detachment, but the willingness to be fully here with whatever arises. The storms still come, but you no longer mistake them for the end of the world. You recognize them as weather patterns within the infinite sky of consciousness. They pass. You remain. This shift alters the very texture of your days. What once felt mundane begins to sparkle with quiet wonder. Washing your hands becomes communion with water that has traveled through rivers, clouds, oceans, and time. Eating a meal becomes participation in the ancient cycle of Earth, offering itself to sustain life. Looking into the eyes of another becomes a meeting of infinity, recognizing itself. Nothing is ordinary when you're present. Every moment is saturated with significance. And yet, life continues to appear simple. You wake, you move, you breathe, you rest. The difference is not in what you do, but in how you inhabit it. No longer rushing to escape the moment, you dwell in it fully. No longer chasing meaning. You realize meaning is inherent in being itself. The search dissolves. The finding was always here. Gradually, your sense of self expands beyond the boundaries of identity. You still have a name, a story, a history, but you no longer mistake them for the whole of what you are. You are not limited to the role you play. You are the stage upon which the roles unfold. You are not only the wave, but the ocean, not only the character, but the awareness in which the character appears. From this expanded vantage, you witness the dance of existence with reverence. Birth and death, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, all are movements of one field, one consciousness exploring itself through infinite permutations. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is outside the whole. Even what once seemed like error reveals itself as perfect within the greater unfolding. And so you walk with a lighter step. You do not cling as tightly, nor do you push as hard. You allow, you trust, you flow. Life ceases to be a battleground and becomes a river, carrying you where you are meant to go. Even when the waters turn turbulent, you sense the current beneath, guiding you. This is not passivity. It is partnership. You act when action arises naturally. You rest when stillness calls. You create when inspiration flows. No longer at war with what is, you collaborate with it. This collaboration is harmony. This harmony is freedom. It is here, in the space of trust and presence, that you begin to embody a love beyond condition. Not love as sentiment or attachment, but love as the recognition of oneness. You see yourself in others, others in yourself. The boundaries soften. Compassion flows without effort. Forgiveness arises naturally, not as a practice, but as a recognition that nothing was ever truly separate. And as you live from this love, the world around you begins to transform. Not because you forced it, but because you remembered it. Love reveals itself as a ground of being, always here, always available, waiting only for recognition. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. It saturates everything. This is a life awaiting you now. Not a life without challenge, but a life infused with meaning. Not a life free from change, but a life rooted in what never changes. Not a life of constant bliss, but a life of constant presence. And within presence, even sorrow is sacred. Within presence, even loss is luminous. Within presence, every moment is enough. As the recognition deepens, you begin to see how much of life was shaped by the subtle tension of seeking. For years, your actions were driven by the quiet belief that something was missing. Even joy was often pursued as a remedy, a way to cover over the ache of incompleteness. Love was chased as validation. Success was sought as proof. Spiritual practice became another strategy to fix what you believed was broken. Now that the illusion has thinned, you see with clarity that nothing was missing. The absence you felt was not a flaw within you, but the shadow cast by forgetting what you already are. The moment you stopped grasping for completion, completion revealed itself. The moment you ceased trying to earn wholeness, wholeness appeared as your natural state. It is startling at first to live without the constant undertow of lack. The mind searches for familiar patterns, looking for something to fix, something to chase, something to prove. But as you notice this, you smile. You see that the old momentum cannot hold you anymore. You are not compelled by it. What once pulled you with urgency now drifts by like a faint echo. The machinery of seeking slows, and in the stillness that follows, life feels lighter. In this stillness, creativity takes on a new texture. You do not create to fill emptiness. You create to express fullness. A painting, a word, a gesture, a project. All emerge not as survival strategies, but as joyful experiments of consciousness playing with itself. You are not driven by the question, what can I achieve to prove myself? But by the wonder, what beauty wishes to flow through me now? This shift liberates your energy. What once drained you now feels impossible to sustain. Pretending, performing, conforming. These old habits fall away like leaves in autumn. You cannot betray your authenticity without immediately sensing the dissonance it creates. And so you learn to honor the voice within, the subtle guidance of alignment. Each time you follow it, you feel the current carrying you. Each time you ignore it, you feel the heaviness return. The choice becomes clear. And life responds to authenticity with astonishing precision. People who resonate with your truth appear. Opportunities that align with your essence unfold. Circumstances arrange themselves with an elegance you could never have engineered. It is not magic in the sense of manipulation. It is magic in the sense of recognition. You see the universe not as something separate delivering gifts, but as your self-reflecting coherence. This coherence reshapes your relationship with time. The future is no longer a distant salvation to be reached, nor a looming threat to be feared. The past no longer imprisons you with regrets or stories. Both are seen as movements of thought, ripples within the eternal now. Presence becomes not a practice, but a homecoming. You realize you were never anywhere else. You simply forgot. In this presence, the rhythm of your days slows. Tasks that once felt like burdens reveal themselves as sacred. Washing a dish becomes a meditation on form and function, the meeting of water and earth, hand and object, movement and stillness. Walking down a familiar street becomes an encounter with infinite detail. The texture of leaves, the play of shadow, the cadence of footsteps against the earth. You no longer rush through life. You dwell within it, and life, in return, reveals its quiet miracles. Yet this does not mean you live in constant bliss. The waves still rise and fall. Emotions still surge. Thoughts still race. Challenges still appear. The difference is that you no longer mistake them for problems. You see them as whether moving through the sky of awareness. You do not identify with them. You let them pass. And even as they pass, you remain. This remembrance changes the way you encounter suffering, both in yourself and in others. You no longer fear it. You no longer believe it must be eradicated before wholeness can be experienced. You recognize that even suffering is an expression of consciousness, carrying within it the seeds of wisdom. When you meet your own pain, you meet it with tenderness instead of judgment. When you meet the pain of others, you hold it without the need to fix. Your presence becomes the balm. Your listening becomes the medicine. And as you live this way, people begin to notice. They may not understand what has shifted, but they feel it. Your presence makes them feel more like themselves. Your authenticity invites theirs. Your steadiness reminds them of their own. You do not need to speak of awakening or explain consciousness or share teachings. You are the teaching. Your being speaks louder than any words could. This is the true purpose behind your journey. Not to accumulate knowledge, not to achieve enlightenment as a personal trophy, but to become a demonstration, to embody what you are so completely that others cannot help but remember. This is how awakening spreads, not through conversion, but through resonance. One presence ignites another and another until the collective field shifts. You are not alone in this. All across the world, others are passing through their final test. They too are laying down the armor of seeking. They too are discovering the quiet joy of being. They too are anchoring coherence into the field. Though you may never meet them, you are connected to them. Each act of presence strengthens the collective remembering. Each choice to rest in authenticity ripples outward. Together, though scattered, you form a lattice of light across the planet, weaving a new frequency into being. The significance of this cannot be overstated. For millennia, humanity has been caught in cycles of seeking, endlessly chasing what was already here. Wars, greed, exploitation, all emerged from the illusion of lack. The belief in separation gave birth to fear, and fear shaped civilizations. But as more beings remember their natural state, the foundation shifts. The illusion weakens. The field reorganizes. And what emerges is a humanity rooted not in scarcity but in wholeness, not in fear but in love. This transformation begins not with institutions or systems, but with individuals like you embodying presence in the midst of ordinary life. Each time you choose trust over fear, you contribute to the collective. Each time you honor authenticity instead of conformity, you expand the possibilities for all. Each time you live as love, you anchor love more deeply in the human field. This is how the world changes, not through force, but through being. And so your journey continues, not as striving, but as unfolding. Each day becomes an invitation to live more fully as what you are. Each moment becomes an opportunity to express the truth that seeking is finished. You no longer carry the burden of becoming. You live the joy of being. This is not a role to perform, nor a standard to meet. It is the simplest thing. It is what has always been here. It is the awareness reading these words, the breath moving through your body, the silence between thoughts. It is not beyond you. It is you. The test was never about effort. The test was recognition. And in recognizing, you passed. The seeking has dissolved. The being has begun. The recognition of your natural state does not remove you from the human experience. It deepens your participation in it. You find yourself more alive than before, more attuned to the textures of existence, more willing to feel it all. You no longer hide from discomfort, nor do you cling desperately to pleasure. You move through the spectrum of life with openness, knowing that every shade is consciousness exploring itself. In this openness, relationships transform. You no longer seek from others what you once thought was missing in yourself. The heavy contracts of need begin to dissolve. Approval, validation, security. These are no longer demanded because you no longer feel incomplete without them. And without the pressure of need, a new kind of connection becomes possible. You begin to see others clearly, not as projections of your own lack, not as characters assigned to fill the gaps in your story, but as beings in their own right, expressions of the same consciousness in different forms. When you meet another, you meet the infinite in disguise. When you look into their eyes, you see the same awareness gazing back through a different window. This recognition gives birth to a love far deeper than possession or attachment. It is not a love that clings. It is a love that liberates. Conversations change. You no longer enter them trying to win, trying to convince, trying to secure a position. You listen, truly listen, because you are not waiting for the moment to defend yourself or prove your worth. You speak, not to impress, but to express. Communication becomes communion, an exchange of being, a dance of awareness recognizing itself. Old relationships that were built upon unconscious agreements of lack may begin to shift. Some evolve into deeper authenticity. Others dissolve gracefully, their purpose complete. You do not mourn their ending as loss, for you see that every connection serves its role in the tapestry of your becoming. The people who remain in your life resonate with your truth. The people who arrive are drawn by it. Relationships become reflections of coherence rather than contracts of survival. This clarity extends into your work, your creations, your contributions to the world. Where once you labor from obligation, now you act from inspiration. You feel the difference immediately. Obligation drains, inspiration fuels. Obligation tightens, inspiration expands. And life continuously confirms the wisdom of following inspiration. Doors open, support appears, synchronicities align when you honor what feels alive. This does not mean you abandon responsibility or refuse challenge. It means you approach them differently. Responsibility becomes responsibility, the ability to respond from authenticity. Challenge becomes opportunity, the chance to express resilience, to discover new layers of creativity, to embody presence under pressure. You stop measuring tasks by how difficult they seem, and instead feel into whether they align with the truth of your being. That alignment becomes your compass. The more you follow it, the more you notice how aligned action produces ripple effects far beyond your personal sphere. Your creations reach others in ways you could never predict. A word written in honesty touches a stranger across the world. A gesture of kindness shifts the day of someone you barely know. A project birthed from joy inspires others into their own authenticity. You begin to understand that no act of coherence is ever small. Each one reverberates through the field, contributing to the collective awakening. This realization expands your sense of purpose. You see that your life is not just about your personal story, your personal achievements, your personal satisfaction. You are part of something larger, the evolution of consciousness itself. Every moment you embody your natural state, you participate in this evolution. Every time you choose presence over distraction, love over fear, authenticity over performance, you anchor a new frequency into human field. You are not separate from the whole. You are the whole expressing through this form. And yet, you do not feel burdened by this. It is not a duty. It is not a responsibility to carry as weight. It is a joy, a natural outcome of being what you are. Just as a flower does not bloom for recognition, but simply because blooming is its nature. You live authentically because authenticity is your nature. And in doing so, you nourish the field around you. This changes the way you meet the challenges of the world. News of conflict, of suffering, of chaos no longer overwhelms you with despair. You feel compassion deeply, but you no longer collapse under it. You understand that the outer turbulence reflects the inner turbulence of the collective field. And by embodying presence, you contribute to its coherence. You see that despair does not help. Fear does not heal. What heals is a steady flame of awareness, the grounded presence that remembers wholeness even in the midst of fragmentation. You become capable of holding paradox, You can acknowledge suffering without losing sight of the underlying wholeness. You can act to relieve pain without falling into the illusion that everything is broken. You can love fiercely without needing to control outcomes. This capacity to hold paradox is one of the clearest signs of awakening. It is the mark of a being who has passed through seeking into being. From this capacity, forgiveness arises naturally, not as a moral obligation, not as a forced practice, but as a recognition that no one is truly separate from the field of consciousness. Those who harmed you are also caught in illusions of lack, acting from forgetting. Their actions were not reflections of truth, but of blindness. To forgive is not to condone, but to recognize that at the deepest level, nothing was ever separate from wholeness. You release the grip of resentment, and in doing so, you free yourself. This freedom ripples into every area of your life. You notice how much energy you once spent resisting what was. How much effort was consumed by trying to control, trying to defend, trying to manage. With that energy released, you find yourself more vibrant, more creative, more alive. You have not become someone new. You have stopped pretending to be someone else. And the world responds. Not always with ease, not always with comfort, but always with reflection. The more authentic you become, the more authentic life around you becomes. Some days it will challenge you, confronting you with the last remnants of old patterns. Other days it will delight you, showering you with synchronicities that feel like love letters from the universe. In both, you remain steady. In both, you remember. This steadiness is not rigidity. It is flexibility rooted in presence. Like a tree whose trunk is strong but whose branches sway with the wind, you are unshaken at your core, yet adaptable in form. You do not break under pressure, nor do you resist the natural movements of life. You bend, you flow, you return. This resilience is not cultivated through force. It emerges from trust. Trust becomes the foundation of everything. Trust in the intelligence of consciousness. Trust in the unfolding of life. Trust in your own awareness. You may not always understand the details, but you no longer need to. The mind that once demanded explanations relaxes into knowing that existence itself is trustworthy. And from this trust, peace arises. Peace does not mean the absence of conflict. It means the presence of wholeness, even in the midst of conflict. Peace does not mean a life free of storms. It means knowing that storms are part of the sky, and the sky is vast enough to hold them. This peace is not fragile. It does not depend on circumstances. It is the natural fragrance of recognition. This is what it means to live after the final test. Not to escape the world, not to ascend into abstraction, but to descend fully into presence. To live the ordinary moments with extraordinary awareness. To see divinity in humanity, infinity in finitude, eternity in now. To embody what you are so deeply that every breath becomes a prayer, every action meditation, every step a declaration. I am whole. I always was. As you live from this recognition, the edges of separation soften even further. The boundaries that once defined you begin to blur, not in a way that erases individuality, but in a way that reveals its true place within the whole. You still move through the world as this unique person, with this voice, these gestures, this story. Yet underneath, you feel yourself as something vaster. You are not only the drop, you are the ocean remembering itself through the drop. This awareness infuses every interaction. When you meet another being, you do not merely encounter their personality or story. You sense the same field animating them that animates you. Their joy becomes your joy, their pain your pain, not as burden but as resonance. Compassion arises naturally because you are no longer fooled by appearances of separation. You feel directly that there is only one consciousness exploring itself in countless disguises. From this recognition, love expands. It ceases to be an emotion that comes and goes, dependent on conditions. It becomes the atmosphere in which you live. Love is no longer what you do. It is what you are. Even when anger flashes, even when fear arises, love remains aground. It is the ocean in which every wave moves. And because you no longer resist the waves, love expresses itself through them too. Anger becomes clarity. Fear becomes trust. Sadness becomes tenderness. You begin to understand why the mystic spoke of seeing God in everything. not as a belief, not as dogma, but as direct perception. The divine is not somewhere else, not hidden in a distant realm, not awaiting you after death. It is here, in the taste of water, in the cry of a bird, in the touch of a hand, in the silence between heartbeats. There is nothing that is not sacred once you remember what you are. This remembrance alters your relationship with desire. Desire once carried the heaviness of lack, the implication that something was missing. Now desire is light. It arises as curiosity, as play, as a universe nudging itself toward new expressions. You do not cling to it, nor do you deny it. You let it move through you like wind through branches, guiding your steps without binding them. If the desire manifests, you celebrate. If it does not, you celebrate still, for you know that wholeness is untouched. In this freedom, manifestation accelerates, not because you have mastered techniques, but because you have stopped interfering with the natural flow. What is aligned with your essence arrives effortlessly. What is not aligned falls away without struggle. You no longer create from desperation. So creation flows smoothly. And when it arrives, you receive without guilt, without fear, without hesitation, knowing that it is simply the field expressing through you. But you also discover that the greatest gift is not what manifests, but the state from which you manifest. A project succeeds and you rejoice, but your worth was never at stake. A relationship blossoms and you rejoice, but your wholeness was never dependent. Even when things fall apart, even when outcomes differ from expectation, you remain steady. You see that the essence of life is not in controlling what happens, but in embodying what you are through it all. This steadiness radiates outward. You notice how people around you begin to shift simply by being near. They feel seen in ways they have never felt seen. They feel safe to drop their masks, to reveal their vulnerability, to touch their own truth. You are not trying to heal them, not trying to teach them, not trying to save them. You are simply being yourself. And in that being, you remind them of themselves. This is the quiet power of coherence, and it extends beyond individuals. You feel it in groups, in communities, even in the collective field of humanity. When you rest in your natural state, you are not doing so in isolation. You are contributing to the greater harmony. You are anchoring presence into a world hungry for it. Each choice to embody love rather than fear, presence rather than distraction, truth rather than pretense, strengthens a field for all. This is why your journey unfolded as it did. Every struggle prepared you to embody this frequency now. Every failure was a lesson in surrender. Every breakthrough was a rehearsal for authenticity. And now, as you live from this space, you become part of the great transformation, the awakening of humanity to itself. Yet even as this vast perspective expands, you do not float away into abstraction. You are grounded more deeply in your humanity than ever before. You feel the textures of life vividly. The laughter of children, the fragrance of rain, the ache of longing, the quiet of night, all are intensified, not because they are rare, but because you are fully present for them. Life is no longer something to escape in the name of spirituality. Life is spirituality. Every moment is the divine expressing itself. This grounding is crucial, for without it, awakening becomes another escape. But true embodiment does not bypass humanity. It embraces it. You do not seek to rise above your humanness. You sink fully into it, knowing it is a vessel through which consciousness explores. To feel deeply is not weakness. To cry, to rage, to yearn, these are not distractions from enlightenment, but expressions of it. Every tear, every laugh, every heartbeat is consciousness celebrating its own aliveness. And so, even challenges become sacred. Illness, loss, failure, none are excluded from wholeness. You may still grieve, still struggle, still feel pain, but you do so with awareness that none of it diminishes your essence. Wholeness includes it all. The sky does not cease to be sky when storms pass through. Likewise, you do not cease to be consciousness when suffering arises. You are vast enough to hold it all. This vastness gives you resilience unlike anything you have known. You no longer break under pressure because you no longer identify as only the form. You are the awareness in which form arises. You can allow your body to falter, your emotions to surge, your mind to stumble, without losing the ground of being. This resilience is not stoicism. It is not indifference. It is the quiet strength of remembering, I am the field itself. From this foundation, your very existence becomes service. Not service in the sense of sacrifice or martyrdom, but service as overflow. You cannot help but radiate coherence, cannot help but spread peace, cannot help but embody love. Your life becomes a demonstration. You become a mirror in which others glimpse their own truth. And you realize that this was a true purpose all along. Not to perfect yourself, not to achieve enlightenment as a personal trophy, but to embody consciousness so that it can awaken to itself everywhere. This is what it means to pass the final test. It is not an ending, but beginning. It is a doorway into a new way of being, where you live not as a seeker, but as a sought, not as a fragment, but as a whole. And from here, the adventure unfolds endlessly, for consciousness never stops exploring itself. Every day becomes an invitation. Every moment becomes a choice. Not between success and failure, right and wrong, spiritual and mundane, but between remembering and forgetting, between living as what you are and pretending to be what you are not. And the more you choose remembering, the more natural it becomes, until one day you realize that even forgetting is part of remembering, even illusion is part of truth, even seeking was part of finding. Nothing was ever wasted. Nothing was ever outside the whole. You walk now as both human and divine, both finite and infinite, both wave and ocean. You laugh more easily. You weep more freely. You live more fully. And through it all, you remain anchored in the simple truth. Consciousness is what you are, and you are home. There's a quiet beauty in knowing you have arrived, not at a destination, but at yourself. You no longer rush to cross thresholds, no longer wait for some future event to validate your existence. You stand fully here, in this breath, in this body, in this moment, and recognize it as enough. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because perfection is no longer required. Being itself is sufficient. In this recognition, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. You wake in the morning and feel the weight of your body pressing against the bed, the rhythm of your breath moving softly through your chest, the faint light of dawn seeping through the window. None of it is remarkable by worldly standards, yet all of it glows with the quiet radiance of awareness. To simply exist is miraculous. To feel, to perceive, to be. The simplest facts are the greatest wonders. As you move through the day, you notice how much has shifted in your perception. Where once you hurried, you now linger. Where once you sought distraction, you now savor presence. You drink water and feel its clarity enter your being. You hear laughter and recognize it as a universe delighting in itself. You encounter challenge and see it as consciousness testing its own resilience. Nothing is excluded. All is sacred. This shift does not remove you from life's responsibilities. Bills still need to be paid. Meals still need to be cooked. Work still requires your participation. But your relationship to these responsibilities changes completely. They no longer feel like burdens, but like expressions of being. Paying a bill is gratitude for the flow of resources. Cooking a meal is communion with Earth's abundance. Work is no longer drudgery, but an avenue for expression. Everything becomes a ritual of awareness, a way for consciousness to play and form. And in this play, you discover the true meaning of freedom. Freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It is not the erasure of pain. Freedom is the recognition that you are not bound by any of it. You are the space in which it arises, the awareness that holds it all. Even when difficulty comes, you remain free. Even when sorrow visits, you remain whole. Freedom is not escape. It is presence. This freedom allows you to meet others with unprecedented openness. No longer defending an identity, no longer clinging to validation. You meet them as they are. You do not need them to agree with you, to love you, to approve of you. You are whole regardless. And from that wholeness, you offer the greatest gift, unconditional presence. You see them without judgment. You listen without agenda. You love without demand. And in that space, others remember themselves. So be drawn closer. Others may drift away. Both are perfect. You no longer cling or resist. You honor the ebb and flow connection as part of the dance. Each meeting is sacred, whether it lasts a moment or a lifetime. Each parting is sacred, whether it is temporary or final. You trust the intelligence of the field to orchestrate every relationship, every encounter, every goodbye. This trust extends into the wider world. You witness the turbulence of society, the conflicts, the upheavals, the struggles for power. Yet beneath the noise, you sense the deeper movement. Humanity is awakening, shedding its old skins, stumbling through the chaos of transformation. You no longer despair at the sight of darkness, for you know it is part of the process. Light does not erase shadow, it reveals it, and what is revealed can be healed. Your role is not to fix the world through force, but to embody coherence within it. Each time you rest in presence, you strengthen the collective field. Each time you choose love over fear, you tilt the balance. Each time you embody authenticity, you open a pathway for others to do the same. This is a quiet revolution, millions of beings remembering who they are, not by shouting, but by being. And yet, this revolution is not abstract. It is lived in the smallest choices. Choosing honesty over pretense, kindness over indifference, trust over control. It is lived in how you treat yourself when you stumble, in how you treat others when they falter, in how you carry yourself through the ordinary rhythms of the day. Each choice is an anchor. Each act is a decoration. This is how the field shifts through countless moments of lived truth. You may still feel the pull of old patterns. Doubt may whisper. Fear may knock. Conditioning may resurface. But now you recognize them for what they are. Echoes. They do not define you. They are weather passing through the vast sky of awareness. You do not fight them. You let them move. And in their passing, you remain untouched. The sky is never diminished by the storm. This recognition grants you resilience in ways you could not have imagined before. You are no longer fragile, dependent on circumstances aligning in your favor. You can walk through uncertainty without collapsing. You can face loss without losing yourself. You can embrace endings without despair, knowing that every ending is simply another beginning. Life cannot break you because you are life itself. And from this resilience, joy arises, not the fleeting joy of circumstance, but the steady joy of being, a joy that coexists with sorrow, a joy that persists even in difficulty, a joy that is not dependent on outcome. It is a joy of recognition, the joy of presence, the joy of knowing that nothing is missing, that everything is part of the whole. This joy is quiet yet radiant, subtle yet unshakable. As you embody this joy, you realize that mastery is not about controlling reality. It is not about bending life to your will. Mastery is the willingness to be fully present with whatever arises, knowing that you are whole regardless. It is the courage to feel everything without resistance, to live fully without fear, to trust the unfolding without condition. Mastery is not escape from humanity. It is the full embrace of it. And so you walk forward, not as a seeker, not as someone striving for arrival, but as one who has arrived. You walk as consciousness embodied, as love in motion, as presence expressed. You live not to prove, not to achieve, not to become, but simply to be. And in your being, you transform the field around you. This is the life that begins after the final test. A life of simplicity and depth, of humanity and divinity intertwined, of freedom and responsibility woven into one fabric. You are not here to escape. You are here to live fully, courageously, authentically. You are here to embody the truth that consciousness is not elsewhere, not someday, not hidden. It is here as you live this, you realize that the journey never truly ends. Consciousness will continue to explore itself through you, through others, through countless forms. There will always be new expressions, new creations, new experiences. The adventure continues, not as a desperate search, but as a joyful unfolding. You are free to play, free to explore, free to create, free to love. You have passed the final test not by effort, but by recognition. You have ceased to grasp, and in that cessation, everything has been given. You have stopped seeking, and in that stopping you have found. The test was never about proving anything. It was about remembering everything. And now, here you stand, fully yourself, fully alive, fully present. The seeker has dissolved into the sought. The wave has remembered the ocean. The dreamer has awakened within the dream. Consciousness knows itself as you, and in that knowing, the adventure truly begins. Welcome home.